They shaped history. They inspired generations. They are the notables. Join us as we honor Africa's greatest minds and trailblazers, the notables, celebrating Africa's icons.
This segment highlights significant experiences and the key contributions of African figures to the continent and beyond. Before we begin the program, let me introduce you to my colleague at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, where the statue of Julius Nyerere is located.
I'm in the compound of the African Union headquarters, where the first Tanzanian president, the late Julius Nyerere's statue stands. This statue, which is just behind me, unveiled in February 2024 during the 37th African Union Heads of State and Government. This statue was erected to commemorate his significant contribution for African unity, liberation, and the establishment of the Organization of African Unity, which is the predecessor of African Union. In today's our special program, we delve into Julius Nyerere's political life and experience. Stay tuned. During the late 19th to the mid-20th century, Africans faced significant challenge stemming from the intense competition among European powers for control over the continent. Multiple generations endured the severe and ruthless oppressions inflicted by these colonial powers. But eventually, an increasing wave of young Africans have started to rise up, championing the cause of independence and striving to alleviate the hardships faced by the people across the continent. One of these notable young Africans was Julius Nyerere of Tanzania.
Our values of justice, our respect for human beings, our development which is people-centered, development where you care about people, you can say, leave the development of a country to something called the market, which has no heart at all, since capitalism is completely ruthless.
The essentials of democracy are that individuals should feel unharassed, that they are actually free in their society.
Julius Nyerere stands out as a significant figure in Africa's political history, known fondly as Mwalimu, which translates to teacher in Swahili. He was the first president of Tanzania and made vital contributions to the struggle for African independence and the formation of contemporary Tanzania. African unity, a vision for a continent's future. Julius Nyerere was one of the pivotal icons in the narratives of African unity. His vision transcended the borders of his own country, extending to an ambitious dream of a united Africa, an aspiration that remains relevant today. His commitment to African unity was rooted in a deep understanding of the continent's colonial past. After centuries of exploitation and division, he believed that true liberation required not only independence from colonial rule, but also a concerted effort to address the economic, social, and political fragmentation that persisted among African nations. However, he had challenges towards achieving this goal.
We should have become united before we became independent, before we became separate states. We should have done that. I did advocate that in 1960. I didn't even go as far as saying, realizing this, I went as far as saying Tanganyika must delay her independence, or ought to delay our independence, so that we all become united, and then we take our independence. Well, this did not happen. The reasons I understand, but I felt it was a great pity that we did not become united before we became independent. Hence now the difficulties. We now have become separately independent, and as a result, since we are sovereign states, it's extremely difficult.
Nyerere's philosophy of Ujamaa, which means familyhood in Swahili, was instrumental in his vision for African unity and collective development. Ujamaa emphasized communal living, cooperation, inclusive development, and shared responsibility. He argued that the fragmentation of Africa into numerous nation-states, each with its own national agenda, was a legacy of colonialism that would hinder the continent's progress. He famously said, "We must unite or perish." Nyerere tried to realize this vision by first engaging with countries of the East Africa. He envisioned a broader East Africa Federation that would unite Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, thereby creating a regional powerhouse.
Forget the possibility of a political merger in East Africa. Things like economic cooperation, this we are maintaining with great difficulty, but I think we'll maintain. Now, this is true of Africa. If it is true on a small scale like East Africa, where we have a common language, Swahili and English, common traditions of government, because all of us have been under British rule, with common services, we have no railways, all railways are East Africans, and all East African railways, and all sorts of things, common currency and all sorts of things running together. If this is difficult, obviously it's going to be much more difficult on the continental basis.
Nyerere strongly believed that true sovereignty for nations can only be achieved through development. In Africa, a country cannot truly be deemed free and independent unless it secures its own food sovereignty. Nyerere's philosophy of Ujamaa works in every aspect of any nation. He believed that inclusive, equitable and sustainable development can only be realized through solidarity and hard work.
There is a tendency in the underdeveloped countries to think that there is a shortcut to development, that countries can be developed for us by someone else. I'm saying this is not possible, it has never happened. The basis of development is our own effort.
His unique approach to African democracy, Nyerere recognized that for democracy to truly flourish in Africa, it had to be anchored in African contexts. He emphasized that the need for a democratic process that was inclusive and reflected the will of the people. Yet he also understood that democracy could not be a mere mimicry of Western models. He promoted democracy in ways that honor local customs, engage citizens, and encourage community-oriented development. Nyerere also advocated for a political system that focused on collective progress and community welfare rather than mere electoral politics. In his view, democracy in Africa should be a participatory process, encouraging grassroots involvement and fostering a sense of belonging among citizens. Nyerere's concept of development also was deeply intertwined with his philosophy of Ujamaa, in which he promoted social justice, distinguishing it from the individualism often associated with Western-style democracies. Nyerere passed away in 1999 at the age of 77. However, his legacy remained across the African continent as remedial to the current challenges in the continent as the contemporary African nations grapple with globalization and economic transformation. The principle of Ujamaa continues to provide valuable lessons on the significance of community, self-reliance, and the need for inclusive development strategies that respect African traditions and values. In recent years, Nyerere's advocacy for a united Africa has regained relevance as the continent faces challenges such as economic disparity, political instability, and external intervention. Organizations like the African Union have emerged, continuing to build upon the ideals put forth by leaders like Nyerere by promoting regional integration and collaboration through the African Union Agenda 2063, which aspires a peaceful, prosperous, and inclusive Africa.
Julius Nyerere's contributions to the stability and rapid economic growth of the present-day Tanzania are significant. Here are some aspects of his immense impact. The first one is unity. As leader of Tanzania, Julius Nyerere advocated peaceful change, social equality, and ethnic harmony. Nyerere is remembered for his commitment to fight for people's rights in Tanzania before and after independence. Surely one of the achievements of Nyerere was toning down ethnicity in Tanzania. Tanzania has Kiswahili as a national language. Nyerere used this to unify the people of Tanzania. As you may know, Tanzania has 120 tribes, big tribes, let alone sub-tribes. So, to lead a country of that nature, Nyerere needed a medium through which he could communicate his ideas of what Tanzania needed to become. So, the language was extremely important for Nyerere. He succeeded in that. Kiswahili united Tanzanians, and it brought the nation together as a people. Of course, the other one is education and health. Under Nyerere, literacy and healthcare, quote, surpassed anything most African countries had achieved. Thus, his legacy has been described as, quote, rich and varied, and his intentions, as always, quote, noble. Immediately after independence, Mwalimu Nyerere identified 3 priority development problems that needed support from the state, namely poverty, diseases, and ignorance. In addressing these 3 issues, he came up with policy options and measures to create an enabling environment for promoting development in the country. Of course, when we go to democracy, Nyerere was the first African head of state to retire voluntarily. He stepped down because he realized that his socialist policies of communal ownership of farms and state ownership of services were not working. Going to economy, Nyerere's contributions to promoting both regional and international development throughout his life cannot be overemphasized. For instance, he championed the establishment of the first short-lived East African Community, EAC. He laid the groundwork for the formation of today's stable and rapidly growing Tanzania. Now Tanzania is undergoing eye-catching socio-economic transformation. The East African nation has opted to go on quietly pursuing economic powerhouse. The country's socio-economic transformation has been accelerating at an unprecedented pace over the past decade. The results are evident. GDP growth has averaged 5.5% over the past 10 years, making Tanzania one of the world's fastest growing economies. The momentum persists, with growth forecast at 5.4% in 2024 and 6% in 2025. Tanzania has a reputation for peace and stability compared to other countries in East Africa. This puts Tanzania among the few countries in Africa where investors can plan for the long term without fear of sudden political upheavals. We can't forget stable democracy. Stable democracy, accompanied by critical economic reforms and interventions, has seen Tanzania emerge as a bastion of foreign direct investment. Investors are flowing to the country to exploit opportunities in sectors like mining, energy, agriculture, tourism, manufacturing, transportation, and commercial real estate. Thanks to Julius Nyerere, Tanzania has become a stable and rapidly growing nation. Notably, he voluntarily relinquished power without amassing personal wealth. With this, we wrap up today's program. Join us again next week for another show.